Welcome to Fulfilled Prophecy Friday. I'm Cherrilynn Bisbano, and I'm here with our pastor and prophecy teacher, Jake McCandless. Each week we come to you talking to you about a prophecy that Jesus fulfilled or another prophecy. Our hope and our prayer is that by us looking back, it will give all of us strength to go forward. We've looked at a couple of prophecies already. We've looked at Emmanuel, God with us, one of my favorite names for Jesus, Emmanuel. We finished Bethlehem, Jesus being born in Bethlehem. There were two Bethlehems, so you have to go back and look at that. And if you want some insight to what was going on at the time of the prophecy, Pastor Jake goes into that, so it's a blessing. You're getting Bible history as well as insight to the prophecies. This week we're talking about genealogy. Did you get a DNA kit for Christmas? My family did. We haven't gotten the results back yet. But how important is genealogy? Pastor Jake, how important is it? And welcome.
Well, the most exciting passages in the Bible are genealogies, right?
Everybody skips over it. I skip over it. I'm sorry.
You know, I had planned I like to read the text we're going to talk about, and I'm going through the names ahead of time. I'm like, no, I'm going to butcher this. But really, when you dive into the genealogies, I mean, really going back to Genesis, it's phenomenal. If you take the genealogy there, when you walk through Enoch and Methuselah and Noah, and you lay it out and you're like, wow, these people, their lives overlapped. And when you take Noah after the flood and you look at that, his life overlapped with Abraham, and it's phenomenal. But there's probably no more phenomenal genealogy than the one you find in the beginning of Matthew and the one you find in the beginning of Luke, because it tells the genealogy of Jesus. And of course, the thing that I gravitate the most is when you find people like Rahab brought into this, this pagan prostitute who is in Jericho, who shows faith by allowing these spies to come in, covers for them, which she was probably pretty good at telling some lies, and covers for them, but asks for mercy. And she is brought into Israel, becomes part of Israel, and not just peripheral in the story. They didn't just let her in and not embrace her. She becomes in the genealogy of Jesus. And you have outsiders like Ruth. And so that's the beautiful aspect. But we're talking about prophecy that's fulfilled. I'm starting to look forward for Fridays. I feel like my childhood when at school, we always had hamburgers on Friday. So you look forward to Hamburger Day on Friday and ice cream.
You get the meat of the word on Friday.
Yeah, so now we're talking about prophecy being fulfilled. There's so many things in the genealogies, and we skip over them. And really, as we talked about ahead of time and just talking about this episode, is we talked about how that the fact of we can either skim the surface or dive in. But if you dive in, you got to be ready to stay for a while because there's so much there. I mean, really, when you look at the timing, you look at the amount of generations there. God is speaking so many things here. But I want to speak about the prophecy that's been fulfilled in these and what really is a specific purpose, especially of Matthew's genealogy. If you read through the two, they're different. A lot of times we don't get that minute into it to see that. And, we're not told. Matthew didn't give us notes of this is why I wrote it different. And Luke didn't give us notes of why he wrote it different. But as you read through them and try to deduct from that, what we find is it seems to be that for Matthew, that he really follows Joseph's lineage. And then Luke, we believe he probably followed Mary's. But maybe even more detailed is you look into Matthew, and they say Matthew wrote his gospel with the point of saying Jesus is the Messiah. Yes. He is the promised king.
To the Jewish people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And when Luke, and Luke was a Gentile, he was a Greek. And so he writes with the focus of really just the humanity
Son of
of
man?
Jesus. Yeah, the
Son
Son
of
of
man,
Man. And
yes.
again, those are deducted. We don't, we didn't have a footnote. We didn't have a subtitle where Matthew says, this is the gospel, and I'm trying to claim Jesus' kingship. And so I like to point
Right.
that out. But so Matthew's genealogy looks to follow like when you would read about someone trying to claim the throne. It's more
Mm,
this legal intact of dynastic that Jesus has claim to the throne, the Davidic throne.
mm,
While in Luke, it's more of a claim of he is in this family. He does belong in this family. He is, and so it's more of this connection of to who he was and with that. But so again, I want to go to Isaiah, as we've looked at Isaiah already when we talked about the virgin birth. But in Isaiah 9,
mm.
we read in verse 7. Just I want to back up because this is one that we read a lot at the Christmas time. In verse 6, it says, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting
Mm,
Father, Prince of Peace, and of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and withholding it with justice and righteousness, and from the time on and forever, the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this."
mm.
And so it's
Time on and
promised,
forever.
and one of the things that's just really remarkable in prophecy is its connection to the covenants.
Mm,
And again, as I said, we can either skim the surface or go deep when we get into this subject, but there's two covenants that really run the gamut of Scripture. You had the one given to Abraham that
yep. And the Davidic. Yep.
his descendants would have the land, and then one given to David that there would always be a descendant on the throne.
Mm-hmm.
And so here in Isaiah, it picks that Davidic covenant up. David lived 1000 BC, and so this is 300 years later. Isaiah's continuing this, and he says there's
Mm,
going to be a son who comes, a Messiah that comes. We read in Isaiah 11, verse 10, it says, "In that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his place of rest will be glorious." And so root of Jesse, again, being the father of David. And so this
mm-hmm.
promise of a Davidic king that would come. And so as Matthew writes the genealogy, he's
Mm-hmm.
showing that Jesus was this promised son of David. But the
Mm,
issue was he was a babe in a manger, grew up in poverty in the
mm.
backwoods of Nazareth, had a 3-year ministry, dies. We know raises from the grave, ascends into heaven, but we don't see the kingdom yet.
Right.
And so one of the aspects of prophecy is this 1,000-year millennial kingdom where Jesus will, when he comes back, he will rule on earth for 1,000 years. And it's the fulfillment of this kingdom. And so we still haven't had all of this fulfilled. But these
Mm.
genealogies, when we maybe look back at our own and we find different things, there's so many things you can find in Jesus's, but the one that really should step out is he is the promised descendant of
Yes.
David who will be on the throne. And that should excite us that when
Yes.
Jesus comes, he's going to vindicate himself and he is going to be king and he's going to have his kingdom. And all those times as kids and as writers, as we think of kingdoms and princes and princesses and knights and all of that stuff, we get to be a part of it, and Jesus is king. It's for 1,000 years, and we're not going to die in the process. I mean, just amazing things still to come.
Now, did some of the people in Jesus' time misunderstand that prophecy?
Oh,
Did
yeah.
they think can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So they are looking for this Messiah, this promised king. And I mentioned Michael Heiser's book a few episodes back, and he talks about, he follows in his book Unseen Realm, he looks at the spiritual aspect behind everything that's going on, this cosmic battle that's going on between Satan, his evil forces, and the followers of God. And he points to the fact that Satan would have tried to thwarted the plan of God's ultimate plan. And so throughout the Old Testament, we have these shrouded mysteries these prophecies, this jigsaw puzzle about Jesus. And so the theme that gets picked up the most in the day when Jesus would come on, when he appeared, was that he would be the rescuer, he would be the savior, he would be Moses. Instead of bringing the people out of Egypt, he's going to bring them out from under Roman oppression, Roman rule. And so they're looking for this military king, and instead they get a baby, they get a guy from Nazareth, and they get a guy who has no home, who's walking around with 12 guys preaching, and he dies on a cross. That's what they get.
And that's the worst type of death.
Yeah. And so, they don't get what they expect. Now, Jesus is saying the whole time, and if you go back and put that jigsaw puzzle together, it talked about a suffering servant.
Yes.
Isaiah talks about that overwhelmingly. But we focus on what we want to focus on, right? And so, yes, a lot of the disappointment and a lot of the disillusionment when Jesus came was because he was not the king that was promised. And Jesus is saying the whole time, wait, just wait. I'm coming back.
Amen. Amen. So as people, our genealogy is important, don't you think? I mean, I see all that stuff on your back wall in your man cave, and weren't you a Viking? Isn't your genealogy a Viking? Now I understand why.
No, I think you've dove into your ancestry, and you've told me a lot of cool stories of just what you found. I've not, but there was I have a great uncle that my family always talked about the stories he would tell, and my grandmother followed in his footsteps, a wonderful storyteller, and she would tell the story that he would tell of how that we came over in Viking ships, and they weren't going to make it, and so they had to draw straws, and then he would leave it alone and say, and our family continued. Well, I hope that's not the case, So it's not just Vikings, cannibalistic Vikings, but so we talked about that. I'm not looking back to my ancestry very much, but I look back, and that family name actually could have very well been a Viking family. And so I had to call family members and say, hey, you know what? That might not be that, hopefully the whole story part's crazy, but the Viking thing might be true. But I think yours is a lot more exciting. You've dove into a lot more details.
Well, I have in my ancestry Sir Francis Drake. And
cool.
I think a general from the American Revolutionary War. I'm a daughter of the American Revolution. But I wanted to ask you, to me, and I hope I don't upset anybody by saying this, but it's a no-brainer. We're all either a descendant of Shem, Ham, or Japheth.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, purple, orange.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
And then you go before that, we're all descendant of Noah, all descendant of Adam, yeah.
Yeah, because everybody was wiped out, and then there was Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we're all, that's the way I look at it when people are like, well, I'm this, I'm that, the other thing. I'm like, well, I'm Shem, I'm probably Ham.
But we're all the same. And I mean, that alone, we talked about our ancestry and made fun of different things, but if you look back and trace it back, it should end all racial diversity. It should end all walls that we put up and we build up. It should. And we all come from the same source. We all ultimately come from God and his creation.
So if we really look at it, it is Shem, Ham, or Japheth, one of us.
Yeah.
So,
and if you go back to them, you find prophecies in their lives too. That's another wormhole to go down. But there was prophecies told about each of those brothers. Oh,
I wouldn't mind going down that road one day. But I want to ask you, you had covered Rahab. Now, can you talk a little bit about women being in the genealogy of Jesus? I mean, wasn't that for people to see that women were listed? That was really monumental back then, wasn't it?
It was, and not just being listed. It was Jesus's overall treatment of women. I mean, we see women being brought into the story, into the narrative, and really, as you look back and you study, especially Luke's gospel, it is seen as kind of groundbreaking in the
Mm.
fact that he aims it and he brings in these stories of people who are marginalized in that time. Whether that's shepherds,
Mm.
which was seen as a very lowly position, they're the ones invited first to see the king.
Yep.
Uh, and you follow it through, but he brings a lot into the narrative of women who played a big part in Jesus' ministry and his
Mhm.
life, and then you see in that lineage. That's one of the things that I think we could really take stock in and take value in, is because women were very marginalized in that society and not given the esteem definitely that they should. And I know even today we talk about differences and lack of fairness there, but Jesus really pinpointed and involved women who were not being involved in other parts of life.
So Rahab, Ruth, and who else? Who are some of the other women that were in the genealogy?
Well, I think Mary, I mean, she plays the central part, with that. And with Rahab and Ruth, it wasn't just the fact they're women, they were outsiders. They were
Hmm.
outsider women. And then you follow Jesus throughout the Gospels, and he's inviting in women as well as men with checkered paths. Um, he that's who Jesus is. He
Hmm.
invites us in. But I think of Ruth's story. I mean, she's a Moabite. She's a
Yeah.
pagan, and she gets invited in and loved within the community. And Boaz is listed in there, and so that love story that we read in Ruth wasn't just a story of the past. It comes connected with Jesus
So
down the road.
wasn't Ruth King David's great grandmother or something like that?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
phenomenal. Yeah.
So Pastor Jake, tell us how we can get a hold of you, and I'll let people know how they can book a time for you to come to their church and speak.
Well, I would love to. It's been really cool. And I want to mention this too. I'm speaking at an upcoming conference, very big prophecy conference in Nashville, Tennessee, called Understanding the Times. And if anyone out here has a concern, thought about prophecy, this is the place to go. It's only $50 for a weekend event. It's in a very cool venue. I'm there, but you don't have to listen to me. Listen to the other guys. It's a great list of speakers, very powerful.
What's
But
it
even though
called?
it's called Understanding the Times, Nashville. And so you can look it up. It's online. Phenomenal conference. Again, $50. And if you're in ministry, if you're pastor family, it's free. Very cool. And I went last year, the first one. I just went as a guest.
And you're speaking this year.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You didn't tell me that. That's awesome.
Yeah, but as a guest, I went. I've been to a lot of conferences. And yes, it was on prophecy, but I was just weeping in terms of missions.
Mhm.
Every one of the speakers has a presence in the Middle East in ministry and missions. I'm the guy that doesn't, because my role, I believe in this, is connection to the church and looking where the church is dealing with prophecy. So even though I get the chance to do that, and I encourage listeners to go. It's just an awesome event. But I want to speak in local churches because I want to help prepare congregations and be a tool for that. Find
What
out
are the
about me at
dates
prophecy.
for that? What are the
Yeah,
dates?
it's March 9th, 10th.
Ah.
Very cool venue. It's the barn at Sycamore Farms, a unique venue. It's in Nashville, which is cool. But every one of these guys are on the ground in the Middle East. Yes, they're teaching about the Middle East aspect of prophecy, but they are doing missions there as well.
Wonderful. So if you want to get a hold of Pastor Jake, you can go to prophecysimplified.com. That's prophecysimplified.com. And if you would like to inquire about having him come to your church or an event to speak on prophecy or another topic, you can contact me, Cherrilynn, Cherrillynn, at SeriousWriter.com. Cherrilynn at SeriousWriter.com. We want to thank you for joining us for Fulfilled Prophecy Friday, and we pray that our time looking back will give you strength to go forward. Thank you, and until next Friday.